Hi, this is the second part in the series of tutorial for explaining the gateway service. In the previous tutorial, I have explained how to perform a get operation through the to the OData service and display them in the front end. And in this tutorial, I'm going to explain how to perform filter operation for the service. So this is the output of the application which we have developed earlier, and in this application for the select button I'm going to create a pop-up in which I'm going to list the list of products that are available with the selection option. Now whichever the product that has been selected, for those particular product I'm going to apply filter to the table. So this is what we are going to see in this particular session. So for opening the dialog, I'm just going to create a fragment which contains the dialog control. So inside the product management folder of our project, I'm going to create a new folder with the name fragments, and inside that I'm going to create a fragment file named dialog.fragment.xml. Now, when you're going to construct a fragment, you typically specify the fragment definition, and inside the content region of the fragment, you specify your controls. Whereas when you're going to use some popover control such as dialog control, you don't have to specify the core fragment definition. Instead, your base definition of your fragment can be the dialog control itself. So here I'm directly going to create a dialog control, and this has the namespace sap.m, which means at the time of rendering, this dialog control will be looked from the sap.m library, and it will have this sap.m.dialog that would be the URL form, and the control would be read. So inside the dialog, we have two things. One is the content region. So I'll just go ahead and open the dialog control. So inside the dialog, we have this content region as well as we have the button region. So in the content region, we will place a list of products, and in the button region, we will specify the OK and cancel button. So first, I'm just going to leave my content region blank. So content, and in the buttons region, I'm going to construct a couple of button with text, OK, and icon sap hyphen icon colon accept, and button text cancel, and icon sap hyphen icon colon cancel. So I have constructed a couple of button over here, and in the content region I'm just placing a text box, so in which I'm saying demo content, and for the dialog control I'm specifying some additional properties such as icon, in which I place this filter icon, and I'm going to specify the title for the dialog as filter product details. So our fragment is now constructed, and on click of this select button I'm going to instantiate the fragment, for which I'm going to construct a event handler method. So press will be the event handler method which will handle the select button, and I'm just saying handle select, and I'm creating the event handler method in the product controller as well. Select button. So this does not take any parameter, and in this handle select, whenever the select button has been triggered, I'm just going to open up the dialog. Now each and every time we click the button, it will keep on instantiating the fragment, which will reduce the performance of our application. To avoid that, I'm just going to instantiate the fragment only once. For that, I'm just going to make a check that I am going to construct my fragment in a global variable. So I'm just making a check that if this dot underscore o fragment, sorry, o dialog is not available, only then instantiate it. So this dot underscore o dialog is the variable in which I'm going to instantiate my fragment. So I'm just making a check that whether this has been defined or not, which means whether the value has been assigned a single time or not. So if it is not assigned even a single time, only then instantiate and store the values. Otherwise, you do not instantiate it once again. So here I'm going to instantiate my fragment, and I specify this underscore to specify that this is a private variable of this controller. So o dialog is equal to sap.ui.xml fragment, and I pass three parameters. One is the fragment, sorry, dialog id, and that is the id for the fragment which I'm instantiating, and second one is going to be the path, and third parameter is going to be the controller reference. So the path for the fragment would be product management dot fragments dot dialog, and once the fragment has been instantiated, I'm going to add this fragment as a dependent to the view, so that the model that is associated with the view that will also be available for the fragment as well. So I'm just getting the reference of the view by calling the method this dot get view of dot add dependent dependent add dependent is the method, and I'm saying that add this dialog as a this dialog as a dependent for the view, which means whatever is available to the view, they are also available to the fragment as well. Now this fragment, it is pointing to my dialog control, which means whatever that thing that I have instantiated, it will internally instantiate the dialog control. If there is going to be a fragment definition, and inside the fragment definition, if there is going to be a set of contents in which you have created multiple controls, then you will have to this instance, it will specify to the content region of your fragment. Now that I have created the dialog control as the base for the fragment, now the instance of this fragment is going to contain the instance of the dialog control. So using the dialog controls instance, I'm just saying that this dot o dialog dot calling the open of method in order to open the fragment. So now let's go ahead and test our application, and before that I'll just place a debugger here. Press F12 to open the debugger. So I click on select button, and this is going to verify that whether the dialog has been already instantiated. If it is not, then it goes for the first time, it instantiate the dialog, it gets the reference of the view, and call the method add dependent to add this dialog to the particular view. Then I call the method open in order to open the dialog, and here you can see that the dialog has been opened as a fragment which has two buttons, OK and cancel. So the cancel doesn't contain any icons, possibly because of wrong name for the icon value. So I'll just, so you can just check that. So now what I'm going to do is on click of the cancel button, I'm just going to close the dialog. So for that, I'm just going to create an event handler method, handle dialog close. So variable, sorry, handle dialog close function of. Now that I have created this fragment as a global variable for the controller, this is available within all the methods inside the controller. So I just call this method, and I call the method by using the instance of the fragment. I'm just calling the method close to close the dialog. So refreshing the application and click on select. So when I click on the cancel button, what has happened? Okay, we haven't assigned any event handler over here in the dialog. So when I click on press handle dialog close, is it close or cancel? Okay, close. So I'll just remove the debugger. So when I click on cancel, it is going to close the dialog. Now for the dialog, I'm just going to place this content region with the list of product. So in the content region, I'm just going to create a list with the ID. Let's say list ID, for which I'm specifying the items aggregation with that of the products. So I'll just show it to you first. Now for the dialog, when we have created it, I haven't specified any model associated with the dialog. So I just added one step here, that this dot get view dot add dependent of this dialog. So I'm just adding this dialog as a dependent to the view, so that the dialog inherits from the view. Apart from that, I haven't specified anywhere which model has to be associated with the dialog. So now if you go here, I'm just opening the dialog, right click, inspect element, and you can see that the dialog has been created with the ID dialog 0. I'm going to the console, sap.ui dot get core of by ID dialog. So variable o dialog is equal to o dialog dot get model of product is the name that I have associated with the model. So now you can see that the product model is also being applied to the dialog control as well. That is because I have added this as a dependent to the view. So you can just uncomment it, and you can just check whether you are able to still receive the model data here. So in this model data, we wanted to be able to perform to binding to the entity products. So I'm just going to construct a list over here, and I'm going to specify it to the fragment. So list id is equal to list id, and items is going to be, I'm going to perform a binding here. So products slash products is the name of the entity, and I'm just going to set the mode of the list as multi-select so that user can select multiple values. I'm setting the mode, and inside the list, I'm going to set the list item as standard list item, and for this list item, I'm just going to specify the title property as products, that is the name of the model, slash id. So I have specified a relative binding over here. So let's go ahead and check the application. So you can see that the product list has been selected. Now when user selects certain entries, and when he clicks on this, I just wanted to take those selected entries, and I wanted to apply that filter to the table control so that the table display only those selected values. So for that, I'm going to create another event handle method for the OK button. I'm just naming this as handle dialog OK. And this is going to take a parameter o event function of, sorry, I don't need this parameter actually. Now when user clicks on this OK button, the first thing that I wanted to do is I wanted to get to know the reference of the list so that I can actually get what are the list that has been, what are the items that has been selected. So you can see that the list, it will be formed with the extension of fragment and along with the ID that I have specified for the list. So the ID would be Eventually it's going to be 1 second. Okay, it's going to be dialog id hyphen hyphen and the id of the list that I have specified within the fragment list id. So that you can right click here and you can see that. So you can see that the id has been specified as dialog id hyphen hyphen list id. So there is actually a specific method to retrieve the ID within the fragment by calling the instance. That is the method that you're supposed to call. So in this tutorial, I'm just going to go ahead and give the ID directly and get the control reference. So variable a selected is equal to this dot get, sorry, sap dot ui dot get core of by id. I'm getting the reference of this list, and once I got the reference of the list, I'm just calling the method get selected items to get the list of values that has been selected by the user. Then I'm just going to loop this array one by one and I'm going to create a filter. So since that the model it accepts the filter only in the form of an array, I'm creating a filter array. Array filter is equal to an empty array, and I'm going to loop this selected values and I'm going to construct the filter for each and every selected values. So for that I'm going to loop this a selected array. Now whenever it is possible to use some operation, if there is a jQuery operation available, then you are supposed to use this jQuery function. So here the dollar is a symbol that is going to represent your jQuery, and dollar dot um, each each is the method that is going to loop the control. So I'm just giving this a selected and I'm writing a callback function here in which I'm going to take two parameters. One is index and another one is the value, and in the callback function I'm just placing a debugger for now. So I have just written a simple syntax for looping the array through jQuery. So I have set the jQuery method for each as a selected is the value, a selected is the array, and that is, it has to loop. And for each loop it has to call this function, and while calling this function it has to import these two parameters. One is the index and another one is the value. So index will tell which loop was, and the value will give what is the actual value in the array. So that you can see it in the debugger. I said okay, what has happened? Okay, actually the debugger was disabled. Okay, so you can see that the index is now 0 and the value is having the reference of the first line item that has been selected. So that you can actually see by see here. So list id 0, that is the 0th item has been selected. Now using the value I'm just going to get the filter, sorry, using the value I'm just going to get what is the value that has been selected, and I'm going to apply the filter. So for creating the filter I'm just creating a filter new sap dot ui dot model is the library in which we have the class filter to construct the filter, and this is going to take three parameters. The first parameter is going to be the field for which I'm going to apply the filter in the service. So I'm going to apply the filter for id attribute of the service. Then what is the operation that I wanted to perform is equal to id is equal to, and what is the value. So value dot, since the property is bind to the title of the list item, I'm just going to call the getter method for that, and I'm going to retrieve the information. So get title of is going to give me the value, and based upon which I have constructed the filter, and I have push dot push oh filter. So I have pushed the filter as well. So now in my OK button, I have created a filter, I have obtained the selected values, I have looped the selected values, and I have created a filter array. Now this filter array I have to apply it to the table control in order to create the filter. So the table control, it was created with the id product table. So using the id, I'm going to get the instance of table variable, sorry, variable o table is equal to this dot get view of by id, passing the id of the table, and I'm getting the table reference. So to the table, it's just going to display the list of values that was binded to it. So actually we will have to apply the filter to the binding, so that when the call is made to the backend, whatever the filter that we have applied, that filter will be considered and the url for the service call would be appended accordingly. So to get the binding, variable o binding is equal to, I'm from the table I'm calling the method get binding, and in the table we have actually binded to the items aggregation. So I'm just pausing get the binding of items aggregation from the table. So now the table will have this binding aggregation. Now for the binding, I'm just saying apply filter by calling the filter method, and I pass the array a filter. So just go here and refresh this application. And one more thing that I have missed out here is, once the operation has been completed, we will have to close the dialog, so which I close it by calling the close method.